Dear friends, it's a great pleasure for me to be today in Madrid, in the wonderful premises of Telefónica. I'm hosted by José María Álvarez-Pallete. It's for me a great pleasure, a great honor. And I would like to explain the thrust of our discussion. We are holding a conference on sustainable finance, on sustainability, on climate change. This conference will be held this year in Paris. It will be the 15th conference we will hold. It's a unique opportunity for us to gather clients, to gather investors, business leaders, in order to discuss on all the matters which are related with climate change and sustainable finance. And each time we try to have as an introduction a dialogue with a business leader in his sector who is able to explain to us, to you, the way he envisaged precisely this journey towards sustainable development. And what better choice for discussing about telecom than Telefónica and José María. As you know, José María spent during the last 8 years, he has been and is still the CEO and chairman of Telefónica. He is well known in Spain and outside Spain for the great transformation into a lead Telefónica. In 2016, he was rewarded with the title of Best CEO in Spain, and that's been justified by the great progress the company has made, notably in the field of the digital environment. And therefore, in my view, it's particularly important at that moment in which going beyond energy, looking at the way other industries are participating in this journey, it's partly important to have his views as a manager, as a leader in this industry, on how the impact of climate change, sustainability, is changing his way of looking at his business. And therefore, I would like him, as an introduction, maybe to remind us what are the main drivers of his strategy before entering into more details the way this global strategy is married with a preoccupation around sustainability.
Well, first of all, allow me welcome to Telefónica. We are really honored to host you, and it's really an honor for us to participate in this event. Telefónica, it's celebrating this year 100 years. So we are really proud. It's a very emblematic year for us, and we are celebrating this centenary at a time that we are fully transforming the company. We are trying to move into the next century with a rebranded company, with a fresh start, with a strategy that allow us to look, hopefully, to the next century. And that's why we have been preparing for the last years a company program. It's called GPS, Growth, Profitability, and Sustainability, in order to try to explain to the more than 100,000 people that works in Telefónica globally, what are we trying to do in a simple manner and where are we driving the company towards. And it's very exciting because it's kind of a very good opportunity to say goodbye with honors to the history that has allowed us to be here where we are today and to embrace the next 100 years, hopefully, with a fresh start, with a fresh future. So really excited, and basically it's about transforming not just the way we do things, but the way we produce a relevant product for our customers worldwide, and the way we see ourselves fulfilling a mission into society. We have tried to summarize that in one single sentence, and is that we want to make our world more human by connecting people's lives. And we try to concentrate in that sentence the whole meaning of the whole effort that we are trying to do.
Thank you very much, and congratulations for precisely this anniversary. Could you elaborate a bit on your triptych, which is sustainability? What is the content you are giving to this part of your program?
Well, it's part of the pillar. The S of the GPS corresponds to sustainability, but for us, sustainability is across the whole program: growth, profitability, and sustainability. It's not just one transversal effort, it's the whole thing. And to make a very long story short, a company with 100 years cannot achieve that mark without being relevant for society. And in order to be relevant for society in such a long period of time, you need to be sustainable. Sustainable in the way you do things, sustainable in the way you develop your actions. In terms of growth, we try to produce products and services that are relevant for people, but at the same time that are relevant and sustainable for their lives. In terms of profitability, for us, it's really linked to sustainability. There is no way to be profitable in the long term without being sustainable if you are not relevant. And in terms of sustainability itself, it's embracing all the metrics that now are incorporated and that listed in order for us to be at the forefront of sustainability. And we are very proud because we have been able to achieve that and we have been recognized for that. So for us, it's not just about the way we do things, it's about the way for us to keep being relevant for society in a whole.
I fully agree with you. It's not possible for a company on the long term to be profitable and not sustainable. It's a contradiction in the terms. But when we look more precisely at the issue of gas emission, greenhouse gas emission, there is a question which comes immediately, which is that today the telecom sector is representing between 5 and 9% of the electric consumption, which means 2% of gas emission, which is quite low, but we can suspect it will increase because, and maybe it's a good news for you, it's undoubtedly a good news for you and for the society, the use of digital instruments, the use of AI, and maybe we'll have a discussion about that later on. The use of the cloud will increase and then increase also the consumption of electricity. So how do you manage this element in order not to grow your energy consumption as fast as your own growth will go on?
Well, the first message I would like to convey is that, in our opinion, there is no digital transition without digitalization. Both things are linked. And I'm going to try to explain why. Digitalization is a massive enabler of efficiency, a massive enabler of doing things in a different way. And therefore, when we deploy our networks, we are not just applying that to ourselves, but we are a facilitator for this green transition locally, because we are a very local business. Allow me to give you an idea. We were born 100 years ago to produce voice, because voice was the core product that we were doing. And for that, we deployed copper networks. And then when the mobile network came later down the road, 40 years ago, we were doing voice as the core product of the mobile network itself. But suddenly, voice became irrelevant for our customers. Our customers didn't want to use voice anymore. They thought that voice should be for free. But fortunately, we found another product that was adjacent to voice, which was data, which was booming. But at some point, you realize that you are not able to cope with the data growth that you are seeing through your networks with the old networks. And that forced us to do a massive transition, a massive transformation of our business. Because the way data is growing on a yearly basis more than 35%, there is no way that the old networks are going to be able to cope in an efficient way with this data demand. And that's where fiber and 5G comes. For us, replacing the old networks with new networks, which are totally different. I mean, this is not an upgrade of the former networks. This means go street by street to take out the copper and to deploy fiber and to get to your house, to the customer house, and change the whole equipment. That's a massive transformation, especially when you have millions of customers worldwide. So the message here is that in order to be able to be consistent, you need to replace your factory. We have been replacing our factory, and this factory is much more efficient in energy consumption. We have been growing our data volumes in the last 10 years 10 times, and we are consuming 9% less electricity. And in the case of 5G consumes 15% of the energy of 4G or 3G or 2G. So for us, it's the transformation that we are doing to our own network, to our own factory, that allow us to be greener, but at the same time to enable a greener society. But that's a massive transformation. You need to understand that we are not an over-the-top company. We are very grounded. We need to go street by street, house by house to do that. Massive transformation. For us, that's why we are saying there is no green transition without digitalization, and there is no digitalization without state-of-the-art brand new networks.
So you're of the view that digitization, AI, the cloud will also help all the other sectors of the society on top of yourself also to optimize the energy consumption. Is that your view?
I need to say no. I think that the networks are necessary. This is not enough. I'm going to say why. With the networks, you can transport much more data, much faster, in a much broader pipeline and with less latency. But the AI models are a breakthrough in terms of technology. And in order to train an LLM on AI, you need massive amount of data. And this amount of data means that this model is learning permanently. So it flows up and down through the network permanently. The way those models have been developed are not efficient in terms of energy consumption. I mean, in order to give you an idea, a ChatGPT query, a list of 5 questions, drinks half a liter of water and consumes the same electricity than a light bulb lighting for 2 hours. And the 6 largest OTT players consume 60% of the capacity of the network. So the message here is that the networks are prepared to be efficient, but the way those models are being developed are not. Because those models have been prioritizing the speed of the learning process rather than efficiency. So I think that we have a massive challenge now in order to make sure that this breakthrough technology happens in a responsible way, meaning by responsible, a responsible use of shared resources like water, electricity, or the network itself.
That's interesting because I agree with you. We see a number of countries which are precisely limiting the data centers on their territories, in the case of Singapore, for example, some other countries. So for you, are there limits precisely to this expansion to cloud and AI, which are, as you said, consume a lot of scarce resources? Are these elements of physical limitation and energy consumption limitation be the frontier at which this new technology will develop? How do you see that in terms of limits?
I think there's going to be a limit because I don't think it's going to be sustainable to keep developing these learning models at the same pace without optimizing the use of shared resources. Let me put it that way. We are planning our networks to increase by a factor of 15 times in the next 10 years. That's massive. Imagine a car factory that needs to produce 30 or 40% more cars every year. That's what we need to project. We are ready to do that, but we are ready to do that if, on the other side, there is a responsible use of the network. So for me, there are 2 limitations. One is that there is no way that the energy grid of Europe is going to be able to cope with this explosion of energy consumption. It will require probably $1 trillion to upgrade the European grid. And we need to make sure that if we were to do that, it's because it's needed, not because we are not optimizing the models. And the second factor, in my opinion, is a more intrinsic one, which is that, data, in my opinion, in order to train those models, you need a lot of data. And a lot of those data are coming from social networks, search engines, and other kind of things. So they are using individual data to train their models without the individuals being aware of how their data is being used. So for me, there is a broader question, which is, are we ready through the existing social contract to contemplate what is going to be the use of my data? And I'm an economist by training. In my opinion, data is a new production factor, like capital or labor. So in my opinion, data cannot be expropriated without a fair compensation. Data is part of my dignity as an individual, and collectively is part of the sovereignty of a nation. So we are allowing AI to be developed with, in my opinion, an irresponsible use of shared resources. And on top of that, we need to acknowledge that it's being trained with data that belongs to all of us. So in my opinion, there is the need of a new social contract. This is going to be a good technology. It's a breakthrough. It's the first time that we are creating something that is able to think, structurally to think. So for me, it's like the Industrial Revolution. We produced something that was stronger than any being in the planet. So it's a breakthrough. But like at the time of the Industrial Revolution, we need to think that this is not just the time of technology. Technology is already here. This is the time of social sciences. How do we want this to happen? And Europe has a say, because Europe is the landmark of values. So in my opinion is, how do we train those models? How do we make them more efficient? But at the same time, how do we make sure that by training those models, we are respecting the values that we need to give ourselves? And I think that we need to work on both fronts.
I think your reflection is very interesting because it is at the heart of what we should call ESG, because you at the same time illustrate the fact that there could be limitation which are physical and economical, but also ethical. So how do we manage that is a big issue, and I suppose a big project for Europe. Precisely talking about Europe, talking about ESG, I know that there is a debate between you and the Commission about the use of the networks. The Commission is saying, well, a network has to be considered as quote-unquote green if the data transferred to this network are quote-unquote useful and not others, and you are arguing that it makes no sense. Could you maybe illustrate this point? I think it's very, very important and very relevant at that stage.
We have several fronts open with the regulators, and namely with the previous Commission. First, as I was telling you, we are deploying a brand new infrastructure. This is not an upgrade of the pre-existing infrastructure. This is a brand new infrastructure. And therefore, it's like deploying a massive highway. This highway is a shared resource. It's a shared resource because we deploy networks for everybody. We are a massive customer-based company. But suddenly you realize that 60% of the capacity of that highway is being used by 6 players who pay 0 for that, and force us every year to add a lane to the same highway. But the highway is not reaching another city because we don't have enough money to extend the highway because we need to expand the capacity of the highway. So the existing economic model is forcing us to allocate resources in an inefficient way because we get 0 revenues and my customer gets 0 value for this extra capacity. So our discussion with the Commission, one of the discussions that we have, is that we want a fair use of the network, and everybody should have the proportionate burden of the effort. And that's why we are calling for this fair share debate, which is that whoever consumes more than 5% of the capacity of the network, we should give them all the possibilities to get below 5% of the capacity of the network. But if after several years or 2 years they are not there, they should compensate us for the capex that we are deploying to that, so we can extend. Because the problem that we have in Europe is that Europe has targets for 2030, and with the current investment levels of the telecom sector in Europe, we are 200 billion euros below what is needed, because somebody else is forcing us to invest in the wrong way. So that's the debate. If we want to have these 5G networks, because that's a prerequisite for the green transition, because digitalization is an enabler of the green transition, then we are not doing the right job. We are not allocating resources in the right place.
And how the Commission and the European authorities are getting this message?
Well, as you might imagine, there is a huge debate because we are saying something that goes about the business model of others who think that we are asking to be paid twice, because in their opinion, as the customer is already paying us and the customer is using these services that consume such an amount of capacity, we should already be rewarded. And our message there is that all platforms, all digital platforms are bidirectional. For example, Airbnb gets paid by the ones who owns the apartment and by the ones who rents the apartment. The same with any other platform. So why this sector should be the only one who should weigh the burden just unilaterally? So our point is that we want a fair share of the capacity of the network being shared with others. It's been tough. It's been very tough because there are a lot of interest involved. But I think that we are reaching a point in which, if we want to reach the targets for 2030, this is not going to happen with the existing capex levels. So for the first time, there are reports. First, it was Commissioner Breton, who issued a white paper at the beginning of this year. Then it was the Letta report, and then now it's the Mario Draghi report. And for the first time, we are seeing that Europe is becoming aware of the problem. And there needs to be a dialogue solution to the problem. But till now, we were denying the problem. The Commission or politicians were not aware that we were facing that situation. I think that the good things about this year is that those 3 reports have been crystallizing that Europe has a problem in innovation, in competitiveness, and this is because we are allocating resources in the wrong places.
As far as I understand, you made this point in your 2024-2029 report about precisely the need for investment for the development of your company and society. Are there other areas in which you have the feeling that our regulation at European level is inappropriate? As far as I've read, you have also issues which are similar to the ones raised by the Draghi report on competition, on the burden of regulation and disclosure requirements like CSRD. What are your views on that?
I can spend hours on that. I mean, it's...
I can tell you, me too.
So the first
because
message...
the banks are more or less the same regulation problem than yours.
I was going to ask backwards on the bank situation, on the banking sector, but let me give you an example. Europe was the homeland of innovation in my sector. The first generation of mobile phones, the second generation, the third generation, they were European standards. Neither the fourth generation or the fifth generation are European standards. And why is that? Because for the last 20-something years, Europe has preferred competition policy that forced us to have 5 antennas on each roof rather than to invest in innovation. And that's why we are allocating the resources in the wrong way, because we are forced to invest for others, and at the same time, the competition policy wants to create artificial competition in order to foster deflation. The only sector in Europe that has been permanently deflationary for the last 25 years is not food, it's not health, it's not education, it's telecoms. Because we prefer to have hundreds, I'm not talking about literally hundreds of European players. There are more players, more telecom players in Spain than in China. There are more players in Spain than in the US. There is no European company about the top 20 most innovative companies on earth. And that needs to tell us something about that regulation has become an objective in itself. And I think that regulation is a tool for industrial policy. If industrial policy is to foster innovation, then the competition policy needs to act accordingly. I think that the definition of relevant markets is wrong. I'm not just no longer competing just with Orange, Vodafone, or Deutsche Telekom. I'm competing with over-the-top messaging platforms, over-the-top voice. I'm competing with streaming video. And those market shares are not even measured because they don't have the data. Because those OTTs have become so big, so massive, that they have become a sovereignty on themselves. So if you ask what is the market share of some streaming company here in Spain, the regulator don't know because they don't have the data. So they are taking decision on competition policy, ignoring the reality of the market. Because the pay TV market in Spain is not just us, Orange, and others, it's all the streaming services. Because, by the way, they are now including publicity as well, advertising as well. So I have a very strong view about the need of first defining what is the industrial policy of Europe, what Europe wants, and then all other instruments need to be aligned with that objective. If that target is to have innovation, we have the wrong regulatory environment.
You could say also that, we have to decide whether our priority is consumption or investment. Because it's a paradox to say that we lack investment, which is the whole motto of the Draghi report, for example. We need to invest massively in energy, in telecommunication, data centers, etc., and having policies which are discouraging long-term investment, because immediately they ask competition to take the lead in the way the policy are framed. I think that is another way to say that. And investment and innovation are obviously linked.
Absolutely agree. But on top of that, I don't think the dilemma is between consumption or effects on consumption or innovation. Because the way you measure the impact on consumption, because the way they measure the impact of let's imagine a merger of 2 players in any industry, they measure the impact according to what they call some indexes, like the HHI or the GUPI index. We try to measure what is the most likely scenario in terms of pricing behavior if those companies were to merge. What is the incentive for them to raise prices? But they ignore that prices is not the only thing that affects consumers. The lack of innovation affects them because they will have poorer networks and at the same time they will have less jobs, will be destroying jobs. So the impact on people, on citizens, is not just the impact of pricing, it's the impact of lack of innovation and the job destruction. So it's a false dilemma. I argue absolutely the way those indexes are calculated, the impacts on pricing, but on top of that, I don't think it's the only impact, and we are seeing that. we are losing the innovation train. It's not too late, and that's why the best thing for me about the Breton, Letta, and Draghi reports, namely the Draghi report, is that it established that the first thing is what is the industrial vision of Europe. Then we can correct the impacts on the others. And if there is an impact on prices, let's see. But we are destroying jobs. We are not creating new jobs on this thing. Gen AI is going to slash hundreds, thousands of jobs. It's going to create new jobs, but we will need to fund this transition in a responsible manner. The only way to do that is that we recognize that we need to get somewhere. Where do we want to be 10 years down the road? And that's what we have been ignoring permanently the last 20 years.
And have you the feeling that all this report will trigger real action on the side of government and commission?
In my opinion, we have no alternative. So the only...
So you're optimistic because you think that there is no alternative?
I think there is no alternative. I mean, and you know, if you add to all these things, we need to acknowledge one thing. 25 years ago, there was the combined effect of two massive technological forces. One was mobility, and the second one was computing capacity. And those two forces were reflected into a smartphone. The smartphone that we carry in our pocket has 1,000,000 times more processing capacity than all the NASA when they took a man to the moon in 1969. This is the world of mobility and computing capacity. And that created the possibility of the network to become bidirectional. You not just consult things on the network, but you upload your own content. And that's the world of the OTTs. Right now, we are living the combination of four forces. More computing capacity because we are at the edge of quantum computing, but in the meantime, we have neural networks. You have blockchain. You have ultra broadband networks, fiber and 5G, and then you have AI. Of the confluence of those things, something much bigger is going to be created. So I'm not sure that the winners of the previous thing are going to be necessarily the winners of the next thing. Europe has certainly not been a winner. But if Europe wants to be part of this brand new thing, we need to invest. And we need to invest in network, we need to invest in computing, we need to invest in blockchain, and we need to invest in AI. And that's why I think that we have no alternative. We are at a crossroad. And I think that for the first time in many years, I see the constituencies, the stakeholders being aware that something needs to be done. So I'm optimistic, yes, but after fighting for many, many years.
That's a good message. Can we say a word, because you touched the question of the impact of all these changes on workers, on all the theme of social inclusion. You are also, through your activity, at the heart of another challenge, which is the digital divide. How do you tackle this issue? How do you consider this point?
Well, first, we need to be consistent. And the way to be consistent is that we need to deploy those networks for everybody. We need to go faster and to everybody, the sooner the better. Allow me to say this is the first technological revolution that finds, for example, my country, Spain, at the forefront. Our first responsibility is to bring this technology everywhere. But having said that, then when you do this transformation of coming from a copper 2G, 3G, 4G network into a fiber, 5G, 6G network going on, it needs much less people. And it needs people to do different things. So you need to do this transition also on the labor side of the thing. Telefónica used to be a much larger employee base 30 years ago. We have been reducing down the labor force progressively without one single strike and also with the agreement of the trade unions. But that's not enough. You need to train your people to do the jobs that are going to be there 5 years down the road. So it's about adapting your labor force, but it's also about training the people that you are going to need for the future, because it's much cheaper to train them than to fire them and then hire new ones. So we are running, as we speak, the largest reskilling program in Europe. We have been reskilling 26,000 people in Spain using technology to make sure. The way we have been doing that is that first we have been doing an employment map. Those are the jobs that are not going to be required 5 years down the road. And those are the jobs that we foresee today that are going to be required. So you see where you stand. If you want to retrain yourself first you need to benchmark yourself, your skills, against the ones that are going to be needed in this job that you want to go towards. And then when you have this definition of the skills you need to have, we provide it with the learning platforms this thing has been agreed with the trade unions, and it's allowing us to retrain our people, and it's very efficient. And in the meantime, you also need to sign long-term labor contracts in order to make sure that they know what are going to be the labor conditions for the next 3 years. So this transition needs to be done in a responsible manner if you want it to be sustainable. Because if not, there is no way we are going to be able to do such massive retraining programs if we don't collaborate with the trade unions, and with the works. And then finally, allow me to say one thing. We are going to be working differently, that's for sure. But there is one thing that we need to acknowledge. In the future, and that's a very personal opinion, we are going to have 3 sources of revenues, as individuals. If you have some Telefónica shares, you will have the return of your Telefónica share. If you have an employment, you will have your salary. But you should be rewarded for your data, because data is a new production factor. In the capital markets, the reward is determined by the level of risk you want to take. In your employment side, it's about depending on your skills and the scarcity of your skill. On the data side, it's going to depend on the level of privacy you want to have. So I think that you are going to have another source of income, because as we speak, the data, the value of a data for a 4-family member unit in the US on a yearly basis has been determined by the Microsoft Research Center between $26,000 and $40,000 per year. So if in Spain there are roughly 10 million households with 4 family members, that means that there is between $260 billion and $400 billion of Spanish GDP that is nowhere in our accounts. Where is this data? Where is this value? I think that those OTTs should not just be for free. They should pay us for our data, depending on the level of privacy we want to have. So I think that we need to score that in the sustainability of our things, the data that the telecom network is producing, which is data, very valuable data, belongs to my customers. And therefore, they should be paid for those data. So there is a lot of things going on. I think that there are a lot of things that are going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think that Europe has a lot to say.
Well, let me tell you, José María, that I'm very impressed, because discussing about ESG, we have seen that in your views, ESG is energy consumption, is also social inclusion, fighting against the digital divide, but you are introducing other dimensions. You are showing how these elements are also linked with 2 important ideas. If you allow me to rephrase what you have said, the first one is competitiveness. There is no sustainability without the ability to invest, to innovate, and to offer quality services to our customers. And also the issue of data you integrate into this global thought around sustainability. And I think that it's very impressive, I have to tell you. Notably impressive because you are talking about that with a lot of passion, which is the mark of the great leaders or of the great entrepreneurs. So I think that's a good start for all the discussion that our colleagues will have during the 2 days of this conference. And I thank you very much for having opened so many doors to their debates. So thank you again for all of that.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored. Thank you very much.